And when it comes to food, whether it's wheat, bananas, avocados, strawberries, whatever, go find your farmer, go find your food co-op, buy local. It's amazing the impact that can have if everybody does that instead of buying those other products from the other stores. And I think we have great potential to change the system. I believe, you asked me earlier why I got this, is that by rebuilding these local food systems, it's one of the best ways to make our communities more healthy, prosperous, and resilient in the face of things like climate change or other global events. And so it's a power of buying food holds lots of power. And I don't think the consumer or most people in this country understand how much power they have to change the system so it benefits them.
Welcome to Care More, Be Better, a podcast for people like you who care about the social impact of conscious companies and everyday heroes. Hear inspiring stories from those who put people and planet before profit and personal gain. You'll learn how you can make a difference, vote with your dollars, and get involved today. Here's your host, Corinna Bellizzi.
Welcome to Care More, Be Better. I'm Corinna Bellizzi, a sustainability advocate, podcaster, and PhD student at Prescott College, where my research lies at the intersection of regenerative systems, communication, and social change. 2026 will be Prescott College's 60th anniversary. So in celebration of this momentous occasion, I've selected them as my cause partner from now through 2026. I encourage each of you to check out the college, learn more about what makes them so unique, and consider making a tax-deductible donation. I'll also be making a donation on behalf of every new subscriber to this podcast, so follow the show, join our e-newsletter, and help us support a higher education institution that celebrates sustainability, diversity, and experiential education. You know, each week, this podcast explores stories of regeneration, resilience, and the remarkable people who work hard to restore systems that have been broken by industrialization and scale. Today's guest is doing just that, rebuilding one of the most essential parts of our food system, our flour. Kevin Morse is the CEO and co-founder of Cairnspring Mills, a company leading the craft flour revolution. He's a farmer, conservationist, and community builder who's bringing flavor, nutrition, and value back to local grain economies. It's under his leadership that Cairnspring is proving that small-scale, community-rooted milling can nourish people and planet alike. So today we're going to talk about industrialization of our food systems, of flour, and what we've lost in the process. And also how Kevin's vision for the Blue Mountain Mill could make craft flour the next big regenerative movement. So grab your favorite loaf or pastry and let's dive in. With that, Kevin, welcome to the show.
Hi, Corinna. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Well, I'm so glad you could join me. One of the things I didn't say is that I cover regenerative agriculture quite frequently, and that also connects to my dissertation that I'm working on. So I'm sure we'll have a lot of fun today. What I was hoping we could start off by taking a journey back to your beginning. What inspired you to take on something as fundamental and often overlooked as the flour that we use to make our food?
Yeah, well, gosh, I wish we had more than half an hour. What inspired me was several things. One is the Skagit Valley is my home. This is where we're located, about 70 miles north of Seattle. And I've been involved in farming, conservation, and economic development here for over 30 years now. And one of our big pressing challenges in the valley, which has a very unique farming system, we farm over 80 crops of commercial significance here. And we're always looking at ways to add value, always looking for ways to stay viable for another 120 years. And cereal grains have been a rotation crop here. We've been regenerative. Before regenerative was a word, we've been rotating crops now for 100 years, mostly cereal grains. And
Can you stop for a moment and explain what cereal grains are for those that might not already know?
Yeah, so things like wheat, oats, and barley, those are cereal grains. And we've been rotating them here for almost 100 years to break disease cycles and add organic matter back to the soil. And for about 120 years, we've been losing money on it. And so that's why wheat was identified as one of the ways to add value here. And the idea honestly wasn't mine, Corinna. This mill is really the manifestation of this community's interests and dreams in keeping viable agriculture here. And the Port of Skagit, Dr. Jones and his team at the WSU Bread Lab, the farmers and the bakers all got together and decided this is what they wanted. And I had the good fortune to raise my hand to be the entrepreneur. And it really intersected with all my values of, clean food, community, viable agriculture, regenerative agriculture, and taking care of the environment and being a good steward. And I was 50 at the time. I'm over 60 now. And I thought, what a great opportunity if we could create a model that works here. Wheat, of course, as you know, is one of the biggest commodities in the world still. 25% of the average American's daily caloric intake is of wheat products. If we could do something here that could be replicated and inspired other communities, we could also have significant impact.
Background in farming and conservation lead to the founding of Cairnspring?
That was a big part of it because it's really about values. We're a values-based, community-based business. And I always joke around that conservation, farming, food, agriculture, community are all wrapped up in the Cairnspring burrito. We're not just about one thing. We're about multiple impacts and multiple community needs. And when it comes to, flour and farming, and you spoke to the industrialization of flour, what most people don't realize is that we had 24,000 mills in the United States just 100 years ago. Today we have about 186. And so I also saw the business opportunity here and everybody involved in it, and that flour could be the next craft revolution. And that there's this great opportunity to inspire this new movement and treat flour and kind of be like Blue Bottle was for coffee or Dogfish was for beer. And so it was both value-based and impact-based, and we saw the opportunity for a good business.
Now, to your point, a century ago, 20,000 flour mills dotted America. Now there are roughly 10 companies that control 90% of the market. This speaks to the rapid industrialization of many of our industries, in particular in food, but in almost every industry in this culture. What do you think really caused this change? What happened to all those local mills, and what did we lose along the way?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, honestly, in the beginning, there was a technology that was invented in Hungary called roller mills that made wheat milling much more efficient, faster. You could do it faster, cheaper, in greater quantities.
So is that the rolled oats? That's what you're referring to?
Well, no, that goes through a roller too. But this is, so you have two primary ways, and there's more, but there's two primary ways to mill wheat and other grains. And that's a stone mill, which has been around for thousands of years, which is a set stone and a runner stone, and they come together and crush the grain. Mm-hmm. And then the new invention was called a roller mill, which is big, high-speed rollers where the grain funneled through the middle. And they were able to break them up and process them much faster. And so at the time, it was kind of a revelation in that all of a sudden you can take a product that wasn't shelf stable because it was mostly whole grain, strip all of the nutrients and flavor out of it, and end up with a white flour that could be shelf stable and sit on a shelf for 3 years or shipped around the world. The unintended consequences of that, as you know, are we have a product that is not very healthy and good for you. And it ended up putting our farmers into the commodity system when you have an industry controlled by just 10 companies. And we have a saying in farm country, and I'm sure it holds true other places, if you have multiple customers, you have a business. If you have one customer, they own you. And that's kind of the situation that the farmers are in, being in the commodity system, is they're price takers and not price makers. And so the other impacts of those big industrial centralized mills, and just to give you a sense, we made 7.5 million pounds of flour here last year, which sounds like a lot, but that's what one big mill can make in one day. So when you centralize an industry, when you centralize production, whether it's flour or beef or coffee or beer, what you're doing is you're extracting value from where all those other mills were. You're taking those jobs away. You're limiting those jobs. You're putting the farmers in the commodity system. And plus you're promoting an agriculture that's heavily intensive in terms of tillage, chemicals, and practices that aren't sustainable for people or planet.
Now, you've said a couple of things so far that I want to comment on and get your take on. One of those is that, you're taking a different approach, but you also seem to allude to the fact that farmers really try to do things as minimalistically as possible. Like, they're not trying to be wasteful, right? They're not using more chemicals than they need to, at least given the knowledge that they have. They're not trying to use more man hours or more tillage, given the knowledge that they have. So what is so different about how Cairnspring takes an approach, and really, if you could summarize quickly, what those tenets of a more regenerative way to grow these cereal grains can be, so that anyone listening can get that quick primer before we dive a little deeper?
Sure. So probably the quickest way for me to explain how we're different and what regenerative is compared to the big mills is to do a quick comparison. So the big mills set the price. They have there's almost zero traceability. The system puts those farmers into the chemical intensive farming system. And then they're basically buying a lot of low quality and sometimes polluted grain, mixing it with a little bit of good grain and putting that on the market. We're taking a very different approach. All of our farmers use regenerative practices. We source directly with them. We pay them a premium above commodity that we know is profitable. We mill it fresh. The way we mills the natural flavor and nutrition into the grain instead of extracting it. And then we sell it, like I said, fresh to the customer. So it's a much more lively, fragrant, flavorful product. And then I would also add that the other way, where we look at regenerative businesses more than just farming practices, it's how we treat our people. And so we pay our people above the average wage. We pay for our people's healthcare insurance and their dependents. And in terms of keeping value, we give them stock options, so their hard work gains them a return as well.
Well, so far, I love everything I'm hearing. And I'm so glad that our paths have crossed, so I get to help tell this story. To your point, industrial flour, but also industrial food production doesn't necessarily put flavor and nutrition first. It tends to put instead first shelf life and that long tail of product availability, so that you can have it on the shelf as long as possible, so that you can produce breads that have a longer shelf life, so that you can produce crackers that can seem fresh longer, but really they just don't have much taste other than whatever additives you've thrown in. So what does it really mean for, let's say, the biodiversity, the flavor, and the shelf life when you go to something that is much more whole grain and smaller production like this?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, what science is showing us is that grains and other products grown with regenerative practices can be more nutrient dense. That soil health matters, and that if you take good care of the soil, it takes care of you and the planet. And just a side note, if you think about the industrial flour, how ironic it is in that the industrial flour making process strips all the natural flavor and nutrients out of the end product. And now we have to have enriched flour to replace that. And oftentimes those enrichments aren't even what occur naturally in the grain. Mm-hmm. And so I'm probably going to
put A and D in everything, right? Put vitamin A and vitamin D, maybe iron.
And there's, folic acid instead of folate. And now we're learning that 60% of the US population can't process folic acid. So maybe that's why people get upset stomachs when they're eating enriched products. And so I think I've gone a little off course from your original question. Please guide me back on here and turn so I can stay focused for your career.
Well, I think you're all on point. I'm just wondering, what the difference in shelf life really is between this nutrient dense wheat and something that you find in your, what do you want to call it? All-purpose flour by Gold Medal brand as an example, because they've been around forever.
Yeah. Well, white flour can sit on a shelf or in a silo for 3 years.
Okay.
Our flour, if it's stored in a cool, dry place, can be used and still have the nutrition and the properties for good baking for 6 to 12 months, depending on the flour. The whole grain has a shorter shelf life. But what we're trying to do is help people change how they view flour, and not something that, I don't like eating things that have been sitting in my pantry for 2 years. No matter what it is, maybe unless it's charcuterie or good wine or something. But what we're trying to show people is that, wow, fresh flour is really amazing in terms of flavor and baking quality. And so people are getting used to buying it more frequently instead of saying, oh, I'll just go get a sack of flour that's been in my pantry for 12 months. And that's what we're seeing is people are experiencing it differently. They're seeing the difference. They want something that's fresh to feed to their family. And so we're changing our buying habits too.
Something I've been thinking about for the past few years is how the biodiversity of our climate has shifted so much. Just driving down I-5 or up I-5 towards Oregon and up into Washington, I used to have to literally stop at a gas station more frequently than I needed to for gas just to clean my windshield because of how many bugs I would hit, right? And now with the way that we're farming and with the rampant use of pesticides, we're seeing a really dramatic shift and reduction in not only the biodiversity of bugs, but the number of bugs that we even see in our environment. And I recently was refilling I keep a bin for flour, and I was refilling it and thinking about the fact that I don't think I've seen weevils in my flour since I was a little girl. And I started to think about the connection to glyphosate and how if you're not buying organic flour, perhaps there even remains enough glyphosate in some of these industrialized flours to keep the bugs out of that too. And I don't know if there's truth to that, but perhaps you know. And if you do, could you please share?
That is a complicated question. And I don't have a short answer to it, Corinna. What I can tell you is this. Glyphosate in particular is, as we all know, it's a carcinogen and it's harmful. And it's been used over the past 30 years as a desiccant to actually harvest wheat. And so...
I learned this about 3 years ago, and it's still, every time somebody says it, it gives me the chills. Because it's not even being used for the purpose it was created, right? It's just being used as a tool so that the combine harvesters can attack the fields at once.
Yeah, and both in dry and wet climates, which is crazy. And so what's happening is right before harvest, the wheat field gets sprayed, then it gets harvested, that goes to the mill and comes into us. And so that's why we see these immune system diseases emerging, and at least science is leading that way, whether it's Crohn's or celiac or others. And so glyphosate is a dangerous product, and that's why we're really focused on regenerative to eliminate and reduce the use of that chemical and focusing more on organic. So with the bug issue, though, I want to get to that. And I can't say if that's the reason specifically why you haven't seen weevils in white flour. Now, there's also technology called entolators, which the big mills have, which is basically a pinwheel that travels at high speed and all the flour passes through it and it breaks up any insect eggs and insects that might be in the flour. But to the...
So that's a newer technology that might be used that would prevent them. But I remember it frequently, and it's not like I keep my flour for that long, but neither did my mother. My mother was a baker. She baked constantly. So, we had fresh apple turnovers. And then when the blackberry brambles which rimmed our entire pastures, were in fruit, we would have blackberry turnovers frozen for the whole winter. So we actively used flour. And I can't tell you how many times I saw beetles in my flour.
Well, and that can happen whether it's coming from the mill or how you have it stored too.
Yeah, okay.
I think the story I'd like to share about regenerative farming, though, is, and again, it's just from our own experience, is we have literally been on farms, and I see it here in the Skagit Valley and over on the east side too, where it's arid and dry, is I can see we have snow goose populations, swan populations, duck populations here in the Skagit Valley. And I literally watch them come back to the fields every year that have been in rotation with dairy cattle or in regenerative practices. And they will literally stop at the edge of a field without any fence or anything else. They can tell where the most nutrient-dense grass is. We have a farmer in Ione, Oregon, where our team was out there, same thing. He had elk in his fields, he had wildlife, he had pheasant, and they would literally stop at the edge of his fields, no fence, no ditches, no roads, and they knew where the more nutrient-dense food was, and it was all ground that was farmed regeneratively.
You're talking about all the animals that stop in my pastures too, but we had horses, so there was plenty of nutrient denseness coming on.
It's amazing how the wildlife can sense that and respond to it. There's wildlife showing up on these farms that they haven't seen in these areas in decades, and they're finding the regenerative farms.
So when you work through local sourcing, small batch stone milling, direct farmer relationships, what does the process look like from field to bag? How long does it take? I mean, how many are you able to work with? I'd just love to get a better view of what this actually looks like in practice.
Well, on any given year, we could be working with anywhere from 12 to 18 farmers, at least at this mill. When we open up the new Blue Mountain Mill, we'll double or triple that. And it's really quite an extensive process and how we're different. The big mills buy off the commodity spot market, so they could source from Kansas, Canada, or Kazakhstan, wherever the lowest price grain's coming from. We actually have to do projections a year and a half out and say, okay, right now we're saying in 2026 and 2027, how much flour are we going to make and what kinds? And then Dave, Paul, myself, and others will go out and look at our farmer base, see what they like to grow, go to them this time of year for hard red winter wheat and a little bit later for spring wheat, write them a contract. So we're writing the contract direct with the grower to have not just what we think we need, but go a little bit long in case there's something that happens with the weather or pest or disease issue. And then that flour is harvested next July and August. So throughout the summer, we're walking the fields, we're watching the quality, we're testing the grain. We test the grain before harvest so the farmer knows that they're on track, where their moisture is. All of the parameters are important for quality. Then they harvest that grain in July or August, and it goes into our silos, all usually within about 2 to 3 weeks. It's crazy. Our poor granary managers don't sleep for weeks. And then we mill that grain the following year and a half. So it really is a relationship with the farmers. We see them multiple times a year. We walk their fields. We're always talking about what we could do in terms of the crop's health and resilience. And then one of the fun things we do is we have what's called Toast Tuesdays once a month with the farmers, where they get to come in, beat us up on price, talk about the crops, talk about the weather, talk about next year, and then eat bread made with the flour that we made out of their grain. So it's a very personal, I say, we still work at the human scale, Corinna, which is very important to us. We're not transactional based, we're a relationship based company. And having that relationship with the farmer isn't just bringing value to them, they're bringing value to us. They're telling us what's working, what's not, how we might try to do things differently and help, always trying to stretch ourselves to learn and innovate more.
Wow, that's a beautiful story of not only connecting with your farmers and the hands that work the fields, but also what it takes to strengthen community ties. So thank you for that. Now, as far as scaling regeneration, you mentioned the Blue Mountain Mill. The expansion is set to increase production 12-fold from 7 million to 110 million pounds annually?
That's correct.
That's huge. Okay. So how do you scale without losing what makes Cairnspring so special?
That is a great question. We have to keep our soul. right? And that's all can be, kept in place by staying true to the guardrails that we've established. We just can't stray from our business model. We can't stray from going direct to the farmer. We can't stray from using regenerative practices or our milling process and our promise to our customer for quality. And so those are some really great parameters that are easy for us to follow and work with. And always strive to be better.
From the outside looking in, just with my business hat on, what I would say is that you can probably help to create the economies of scale to produce finished products that will be more competitive in the marketplace without necessarily having to take the margin from the farmers. Do you believe that that will be the case?
That is the case. So there's two things happening here. We put our business hats on. Of course, I went to business school in the 80s, so I'm still, it's hard to remember sometimes. As we scale, one of the important things about scaling, and we thought a lot about how much we scale related to those guardrails, we're going to get more operating leverage and better unit economics. So I'm still going to be able to achieve the same profit margin, but this is going to give me the ability to be a little more aggressive in pricing, hopefully capture not only more market share, but be more accessible to more people.
Without having to pay the farmer less. I mean, because I think that's the important piece, right? Like right now, most farmers are paid 7 or 8 cents on the dollar of what consumers pay for that food. So they're getting the least, they're getting the scraps. And frankly, that's a recipe for bankruptcy because you don't have enough wiggle room for a bad crop season, which is going to happen with climate change. I'm sorry, we're seeing it across the board. So I would love for you to comment on that and just get your perspective of how we can look at scaling these things, perhaps not just at Cairnspring, but at other mills and growers that are operating around the nation.
Right. Well, there's a couple of things that are core to our model. One is that promise to pay the farmer a fair and profitable price. It all starts with the farmer. If we don't do that, we can't do anything else we're talking about. So that is absolutely critical. And what we're doing in the marketplace through the different channels that we sell into, we're creating a premium product that reflects the true cost to both the farmer and the company. That's not reflected in a lot of the commodity. Nobody takes into account the cost of the environment or human health in a lot of the commodity production. And so
externalities from business school.
The externalities. And so our flour can cost double of what some of the other flours cost on the shelf in the grocery stores. We're always going to be 20 to 30% more expensive, even with a better operating leverage at the new mill, because that's what we need to be able to deliver our promise to the customer, our staff, or to the farmer, our staff, and our customer, and maintain the quality that we promise. And so the commodity's the race to the bottom, and we're trying to pull ourselves out of that. And so I think for other businesses, it really is. It's about differentiation, as we all know, but it's also maintaining a premium quality product and not always trying to compete on price. It's crazy when people hear me. I mean, people are like, "Oh, you got to consider." Well, we do look at price, but what we're really doing is trying to race to the top and introduce people to a better product that's better for them and the planet. And right now, a lot of this is timing. Our timing is great because that's what people are looking for. They want to trust where their food comes from. They want to have positive impacts with their dollars. They want to feed their family clean, healthy food that's not going to make them sick, like the industrialized stuff we've been eating for the past 30 or 40 years. And so timing is very important too, and now is the right time. And I would just say, hold your ground and make sure you focus on quality and on impact. And flour is a $24 billion market, and craft flour is estimated to be 700 million of that right now. And so there's a tremendous opportunity for us to keep growing and grow that channel for sure.
Well, I'm curious, Kevin, if you could share your perspective when it comes to things like farm subsidies. I think most of our governmental support goes towards crops that are really animal feed crops like corn and soy. I wonder if there is the same available resources to farmers of these cereal grains and what impact that is having presently.
Wow. So most of the grain farmers in this country wouldn't be here without crop insurance.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, I mean, especially right now, look at the commodity prices. They're in the gutter. They're $1.50 to $2 a bushel below what it costs them to grow it. And so the way the farmers have been surviving, especially since, gosh, was it Earl Butts in the 70s, get bigger, get out, plant fence row to fence row, that put everybody in this commodity system. The only way they stay in business is because they buy crop insurance and they lose money on the crop and the government keeps them whole. And it doesn't really do anything to advance good stewardship of the soil or healthy food or regenerative practices or more nutritious grains. It's all about bulk production, and it doesn't really serve the farmer in the long term. It's not a sustainable solution. And right now, I get choked up about this. I'm sorry. I mean, it's tough times in farm country. I've lost friends to suicide. I have friends who's lost their fathers to suicide, and I see more farm bankruptcies going on right now because these farmers are caught up in this commodity system. And when you have an occurrence like we have now with the trade wars, and they're 80 to 90% of the grain grown in Washington, Oregon is exported. They have no option. The banks won't give them operating loans to plant grain the next year, and they can't even get their crop insurance payments right now because the government's closed. And we're seeing more and more farms being bought up now by hedge funds, foreign corporations, foreign countries, and the farmer is losing, and especially the family farm. And so we're really trying to do our small part in creating this higher value domestic market that pulls the farmers out of this system, because it's really a tragedy. Most people don't know it. I don't mean to go down a downward spiral, but our farmers have a higher suicide rate than our veterans. And so this is a serious problem, not just from the farmer's perspective, but our food system perspective and how we maintain a healthy food supply and healthy soils for future generations. And really, that's why I think I have such a great team that's so committed, and we have such loyal customers, because we are trying to change the system.
Well, and it's the knowledge loss and the life loss and all of that. And I hate to make this all about politics, but there's a certain amount of jockeying going on, and farmers seem to be caught in the crosshairs in several ways. And this is already the group that was hanging on by a thread. So it becomes an act of activism, frankly, to seek out and buy these products that are grown more responsibly, and an act of solidarity to stand with farmers to do just that, to seek out the products that might cost a little bit more, but it's because the living wage is paid. I recently featured the founders of Lotus Foods on this podcast, and I'm also including them in my PhD dissertation. They're one of the brands that I'm looking deeply at. And they are global advocates for smallholder farmers. And they've spoken out to ensure that those small crop farmers can even create and qualify products that can be certified regenerative organic. And if they had not been there all along championing these individual farmers, then, much larger growers and companies with more resources, like Patagonia and some of the other companies that were helping to build this thing together, might have created a system that would have left out some of these smallhold farmers that couldn't have necessarily brought them along for the ride. And so I think it's really important, as we think about our food systems and the things that we consume, that we get thinking about regional buying. Like you're talking about people that are growing wheat and other cereal grains within the United States and a specific territory, Pacific Northwest, probably into Idaho, Montana, on down the road, Ohio, whatever, right? But you can actually get a lot of these resources from within 100 miles of your door and be impacting local communities and be supporting, instead of a global food system that is so disenfranchised and removed from us emotionally, somebody whose life you're making a dramatic difference in today. And I think that's important. We as Americans consume too much, generally speaking. I'm presently on a leaning phase, which means I've dropped 11.6 pounds in the past month. But, hey, having to be real about what I consume. And one of the things I've had to do is remove a lot of wheat from my diet. Why? Because so much of what is available, if you want to buy a pastry at a coffee shop or whatever, is made with the stuff that inflames my gut, right? It has glyphosate and it has all these other residues and toxins and things that my system doesn't like. And when I consume it, I get achy joints. I have digestive distress. I almost get more cravings. It's like my body's trying to shield itself from this thing I've consumed. And I'm finding it, really kind of a purifying process to be in this leaning phase and to be more intentional about the foods I consume, and really grateful for the organic, locally produced in California whole wheat flour I'm buying to make my sourdough bread with.
Wonderful.
So I think we can all take a step in that direction. I encourage it.
I agree. And I'm so glad to hear you doing that. One of the reasons this is a for-profit business is I believe in the power of markets. Our team believes in the power of markets to make change. So that really comes down to the consumer making different choices on where they spend their money. And when it comes to food, whether it's wheat, bananas, avocados, strawberries, whatever, go find your farmer, go find your food co-op, buy local. It's amazing the impact that can have if everybody does that instead of buying those other products from the other stores. And I think we have great potential to change the system. I believe, you asked me earlier why I got this, is that by rebuilding these local food systems, it's one of the best ways to make our communities more healthy, prosperous, and resilient in the face of things like climate change or other global events. And so it's a power of buying food holds lots of power. And I don't think the consumer or most people in this country understand how much power they have to change the system so it benefits them.
Yeah, well, that's certainly true. I really appreciate the work that you've put in thus far, and I'm very encouraged that you're going to be able to scale this, because I think it's that powerful move that is going to make products like what we're talking about more accessible. Now, I have one brand that most people have probably seen on the market, which is Bob's Red Mill. That company's been around for a long, long time. Bob died a few years ago. I think he was close to 100 years old. He was just still going to trade shows with a marching band, wearing his little straw hat and everything. But they are an employee-owned company. So it's a different approach to growing a business. And I like their organic flour, but guess what? They have a lot of non-organic stuff too. And I don't even know if they mill all of their own stuff or if they use other mills. What examples can people go to find connection to Cairnspring? Are there particular brands that they can look for?
Yeah, most of our flour, 80% of our flour is sold into the food service channel. There's a few large production bakeries that use our flour. So Tartine Bakery, Cadoro down in California, up here in Washington, Essential Baking Company, Grand Central Baking, Macrina. But most of our customers right now are, the small to medium pizzeria, bakery, restaurant. In Washington State, we have over 400 customers. We can certainly help people find where our flour is. And we're in grocery stores. We're only in about 100 grocery stores right now, Corinna. That's a really tough channel. It's more like a night fight than anything else. But these stores
competitive for that shelf space, man.
And the only reason we're in there is because these are our grocery stores that wanted us in there, and we don't have to pay a lot of the slotting fees and other things they require of others. And so, you can find us in some grocery stores in Oregon and Washington, and people can just come online. We sell direct to the consumer. They can go on our website at cairnspring.com, and we can send the flour straight to your home.
That's awesome. I love it. Now, we've seen craft beer and coffee become mainstream really over the past 10 years. Why do you think that flour is next?
Well, it's one of the last commodities to go that direction. And I think what I'm seeing, I mean, the only other one, and that's making some headway, is beef with folks like Old Salt and Carmen Ranch and others. But, so flour is just so much part of everybody's diet every day, whether it's pancakes and cupcakes or sourdough bread and pizza. So it's so widely used. I think I mentioned earlier, it's 25% of the daily caloric intake for most Americans. That and what we're seeing is from the professional baker to the home baker, they can tell the difference, Corinna. It was really amazing. We talk about bringing back this middle infrastructure and these food systems to make our community more resilient. During the pandemic, when there wasn't any flour on the shelves in the grocery stores, we were still open. We were running 7 days a week because our supply chain was local. We still had the ability to produce. We had 400 cars around the block here every Friday selling 20 to 30,000 pounds of flour a day for their families. And that was really our first direct-to-consumer sales. And within days after people buying our flour, we get emails and phone calls and people stopping by saying, "What are you guys doing? My pancakes never tasted so good. My bread never tasted so good. My family told me never to buy another type of flour. I keep coming back to Cairnspring." And so I share that one from the resilient story because I think that's a big part of what we're doing here too. But two, people like it when their fruit tastes better. And then you layer on all the other impacts and values that come along with buying our products. And I just think there's so much more room in the marketplace. And we don't intend to be the only company doing this. We're really hoping to help and inspire others. And so I just think the growth potential, both what we're seeing here now, I'm already getting inquiries to help with mills in Japan, in Korea, in Australia, in the UK, in Spain. And so I just think we're in a great position at a great time where people are demanding this type of product.
Amazing. Now, I have been investigating Kernza as a grain. I know that this is also connected to Patagonia, but the Land Institute is working on several projects to grow this perennial long root grain. It has roots that are like 10 feet long. Have you worked with Kernza, or are you planning?
Yeah, perennial grains are of real interest to us. There's great flavor there. The
Morse, right?
Yeah, more. Yeah, and then of course it grows year after year. You don't have to combine it and replant it. And so right now, Kernza and the other perennial grains, there's some great grains coming out of the WSU Bread Lab here just around the corner. They're packed with tons of flavor and nutrients. It just doesn't have the baking quality or gluten strength to be used 100%. And so what we're doing with, whether it's perennial grains or rye or even whole grain flour, is we're trying to ease people into it and say, yeah, take our organic Edison or organic espresso flour and try putting in 10% Kernza. It'll give you a rich, wonderful flavor that you can't get with just regular flour. And so we're trying to build the consumer awareness and the consumer palate, as well as their understanding of how to include it in what they bake. And that's going to be a long-term initiative for us. We just met today and we were talking about some Kernza and other specialty grains that once we free up some capacity here at the Skagit Mill in Open Blue Mountain, we're going to start doing more and more of that here.
Yeah, well, I look at that very similarly to incorporating things like almond flour or coconut flour or something to that along those lines, because I can never make my recipes turn out well if I use 100% of it, right? Like I tried making banana bread one time with only coconut flour and it was a complete failure. It just, like basically you tried to cut it and it just went mush everywhere, So learning those constraints or even just having simple tools to help people make the conversion, I think is really great. I'm encouraged by Kernza because of the fact that it does such a good job of sequestering carbon, because of the fact that you don't have to do things like plow it and to turn up the soil to go ahead and put your new crop in place. And it's actually been crossbred with a lot of wheats to help make the wheat more hardy. So it's not gluten-free as a grain, which I also found interesting, but it's really got some interesting characteristics too. And its flavor is really strong. I'm not strong in a bad way, but just more full, kind of like a wild rice versus a white rice,
I find it incredibly rich. And I think it's really exciting the time we're living in as we're exploring these new grains. And that, think about past 100 years, all the bakers had on this palette was like chocolate and vanilla. Now we have kernza, we have rye, we have barley coming back. We have what we're seeing is wheat varieties can be like wine grapes. There's terroir, there's flavor and color that are in them that are very different and distinguishable. So now by offering these specialty grains and these non-commodity grains, the home baker, the professional baker, has this palette with all of these colors and flavors to choose from. And what we're seeing, and that's, I think, why the romance and the interest of the home baker is growing so much, is that they're able to experiment and invent. And the same thing holds true with the professional bakers as well. And so it's a wonderful time to be alive and be a baker, because we're actually going to have more variety than previous generations, for sure.
Well, it would seem to me that by going broad in our assortment of flours, just as one example, that we would be more resilient in the face of supply chain disruptions and climate issues as well, right? Because perhaps one crop won't grow as well this year, but this other one does.
And that's why this distributed network of production and processing is important. Getting away from that centralized industrial model, because it's not resilient. And most people don't know this, but I think there's 60 or 80,000 varieties of wheat. I was just talking to Kevin Murphy about this. And so it could grow in almost any climate on the planet, except for maybe Antarctica. And so we have not been exposed to that diversity ever. And now the market wants it, and people are becoming more aware of not just why it tastes better or it's better for you, but how important it is to a resilient food system.
Awesome. Now, I know that some argue that regenerative has become a buzzword, especially when it comes to grains. Do you think there's real evidence that regional grains can meaningfully restore soil health and draw down carbon? Or is this more of an aspirational ideal than a measurable reality, in part due to the need to, till soil periodically?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's complicated. I do believe that through this regional model and sourcing, we can, especially when we're working at this human scale and it's science-based. So there's no real definition of regenerative yet, but we follow several guidelines. One is the practices have to be credible and verified by science. And because we work at a regional scale, I don't know if everybody knows what it's like here in Washington State and Oregon. You have a wet, green side of the state and a dry, hot, arid side of the state. So very different soils and climates. And so what working at this regional scale allows us to do, because we're working with every farmer and writing contracts for grains and farming practices that work for them, is that we can tailor it to the soils and their needs to ensure we're really having the impact we want, and also measure it. We have a soil health initiative and sustainability manager that we're out taking soil samples on all the farms. We're seeing what improvements we're seeing in organic content, soil structure. And this is a long-term project. And then we're partnering with conservation districts and land-grant universities to help with a lot of the science, because we can't do it all. And so I absolutely think working at the scale is a big part of the solution, because a one-size-fits-all solution doesn't work and leaves people out and doesn't actually have the impacts that you want. So I'm very optimistic about this and committed to it. And it's not hard to, if you really try, to find the resources in the different geographies to help guide the way. Conservation districts have been around for years, since the Dust Bowl, and they set what's called priority resource concerns. which are scientifically validated. I don't want to get too geeky or jargony on you, but if an area needs more water retention in the soils, more organic content, they've already measured that and set that as a priority. And so we look at those priority resource concerns and build our programs and work with the farmers around them. Plus, it gives us the opportunity to work with the farmers directly and understand what their needs and priorities are. And that just doesn't happen in the big commodity system. It's like they have big mills go out to bid, or the farmers plant something on spec, and then they don't have any requirements, unless they're under national organic standards, to farm or achieve any measurable soil benefits from their farming practices.
Right. Well, to your point, then, it can be measured in the soil. You can measure how much carbon and how much life is underground. The microbiome of the soil itself is changing. And I think that's the takeaway, right?
Yeah, and the structure. Like we've seen, and stop me if you don't want to get too geeky, but one of our
No, I think it's good, because I've heard it described like almost like the soil itself is like a honeycomb matrix, or, it's like, actually.
It's amazing. The use of anhydrous fertilizers, synthetic fertilizers over time, even in no-till soils, and I won't get into all the science, but basically what it does, it creates this salt layer about anywhere from 6 to 9 inches below the surface. And so when you plant a crop, those roots can't penetrate the salt layer and get, another 12 inches or a foot down in the soil to draw up all those nutrients. And what we've seen through farmers using more regenerative practices and weaning themselves off of synthetic fertilizer, using cover crops, they're breaking through that salt layer. They're also activating the natural biology in the soil biome, like you just said. But now these plant roots can get,
deep,
12, 16, 24 inches deep into the soil, whereas before they're hitting the salt layer and not able to, it would stunt their growth. And they wouldn't yield or produce the nutrient-dense grains that were possible because of the soil structure and the poor soil health.
Well, and to your point, using those crop covers as opposed to the industrialized NPK fertilizer, the synthetics, you have less runoff. So that also means less pollution, and you have less cost of material inputs, the synthetic inputs. So that's also good. And I've heard some of these inputs described as being petroleum products. I didn't understand that going in, but apparently a lot of the fertilizers and pesticides are also petrol-based.
They are, and they require, especially synthetic fertilizer, which requires lots of natural gas to make it.
I had no idea before maybe 2 years ago of that one. And I'm just like, wait, what? Why does this make sense? We want to put this on our food?
Bigger, faster, cheaper. And it's crazy. There's natural products out there like urea, which could be used as a fertilizer instead of anhydrous. And that doesn't create the same issues with that salt layer in the soil. We have farmers using plant extracts mixed with molasses and applying micronutrients. And a lot of it's done, again, at the scale where they're doing tons of sap analysis and soil testing to actually see what the plant needs, instead of going to the fertilizer company, who are all doing very good, and saying, hey, can you come out and check my soils and tell me what I need? And, that's like they're writing their own checks.
Yeah, they're saying, oh, you need more of this. Like here, you have this thing going on, just add more of that. So let me sell more of the thing that you already buy from me, or a different version of it. And gosh, just the idea of there being this salt layer. There is a certain point beyond which plants can't grow in that soil anymore, right? Because they just get too laden with salts.
Or if they do, their yield's poor, the plant health is poor, they're more susceptible to disease. So, my crop has a disease. Oh, can you come spray it with more pesticide or more fertilizer? And it's a temporary fix, maybe, but in the long term, it's just a race to the bottom.
Now, I know you've described yourself as an incorrigible optimist who also loves to cook and bake. How does your Italian heritage, I also happen to be Italian, and love, quarter Sicilian, the last name is by marriage, but yes, culturally, I would say I'm more Italian than anything. I love to know how food shapes the way you lead.
Food, growing up in my grandparents' Italian deli and butcher shop. I was just showing some friends last night. There's a picture of me at age 7 in the butcher shop with a straw hat and apron making cube steaks. And I still have all my fingers. Food has been the center of my culture and identity since I can remember. Growing up in an Italian family that revered community, local food, good quality food, growing your own food was just instilled in me at a very young age. And I think, honestly, now that you asked the question, I've probably spent most of my life trying to recreate that Italian community model for not just people, but for food. And so, yeah, everything I've done throughout my career, whether it was conservation or farming and even the economic development work I did, was about rebuilding or contributing to the vitality of natural resource-based systems and economies and industries. Keeping our farmers on the land, healthier soils, bringing fish back, water quality for the oysters. And then at the end of the day, you get to celebrate that at the bonfire, at the dinner, and really know that you've been a part of something hopefully important for the community, but also for the health and well-being of your family and others.
Awesome. Now, what's your favorite thing to bake with your own flour?
That's tough. Right now, honestly, it's still the country loaf. It's still the country loaf. I just love sourdough. I've got the recipe down. Starters, I know exactly where I need the starter to be to get it going. And I'm trying to perfect my focaccia recipe, but I'm still not happy with it. So
It can be a lifelong effort.
I think it is. And that's what's cool about it. That's why you see people getting so into baking now, because you're always learning. You can always innovate and learn something new. And in the day and age of people sitting in front of screens like we are now, they want something tactile, and they want something they can taste and share. And so
I might have to ask you to send me some of your starter so I can try to make something of my own.
I can do that. But I got to tell you, it's really easy to, one of the best books out there still are the Tartine books in terms of making your own starter and sourdough breads. There's others that are out there that do everything from sourdough to, Maurizio's book and Ken Forkish's book and Jen Latham's book, Baking for Kids. So there's a tremendous amount of resources available to us now that the baking revolution has hit since COVID.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
Happy to share some, but I would say, use some local flour that you're buying because it has the biology and the yeasts from there. And then you're also going to be incorporating the airborne yeasts that are where you live. And that will make it even more Italian because it's hyper local.
Yeah, that's right. Now, do you see a future where regional mills end up reemerging across the country, each one rooted in its local community and ecology?
I do. That's what we're working towards. And it's not just because that's the dream and the vision of the team here. I see it because of all the inquiries. And I always like to support. So you've got Jennifer Lapidus down at Carolina Ground. You've got Maine Grains, Farmer Direct, Barton Springs Mills, Capay Mills down in your neck of the woods. And so I think that it isn't whether or not there's a need or demand. Our biggest challenge oftentimes is it's hard to find investments for infrastructure. It's hard to compete with AI and tech companies 60 miles south in Seattle when I can offer a good return, but I'm not going to offer a 30x in 3 years. And so there's other challenges to doing that.
However, there might be less risk in something that has like food. I'm sorry. Like the thing I think about with AI is at what point are half of these ideas just not going to work? And
people are always going to need to eat.
They're always going to need to eat.
Climate change is real. Food systems, food deserts are forming. I came at this, with a little bit of my previous background in economic development and critical infrastructure. I honestly think, just like roads and water systems, regional food systems are critical infrastructure, both from a food safety and resilience, even national security standpoint. And so I'm hoping, and what I'm seeing is more people are realizing that. So it's bringing in more private investment, and the government can help with that too. The previous administration had food infrastructure grants that had tremendous impact in this community and others where we've worked or have friends in community. So, but that is one of the big hurdles. I don't think it's insurmountable, and I think the investors are starting to show up, and where government can play a role, I would love for them to play a positive role. But the big thing is that demand's pulling us forward, and it's a good business right now.
Yeah, that's great. So I think it's possible to rebuild our food system too, and I think regional resilience is going to be an imperative. It's like if we don't adapt quickly enough to this need, then we could end up in trouble. So I feel like we're going to be pushed in that direction anyway. And I encourage people, shop at your farmers markets, get to know your local fishmongers, really get involved in your local food supply. I find it to be one of the most joyful things I do on a weekly basis, just going to my farmers market, which sadly only runs from May until basically Thanksgiving. But that just means that I'm going to have to drive out or get my CSA. I'll drive out to the wharf to speak with my fish guy and get my fish for him. And then I'll go down and pick up my CSA delivery or have it delivered if I can't make it. But just doing those things, even just getting a small portion of what you consume from your local area means a lot. And it benefits and impacts your community directly. So I just want to thank you so much for the work that you're doing, Kevin, for sharing this story of regeneration and revival of an important aspect of our food and nutrition. It's my belief that you're not just milling flour, you're helping us rediscover what real food can be when it's connected to the place, the people, and the purpose with which you're guiding it.
Thank you so much. And thank you for that summary. I could say it any better myself. And thank you for hosting this conversation and all the others you host and getting the word out there. It's really important at this time for the farmers and for all of our communities. So thank you.
Oh, that's amazing. Now, as always, I'm going to include links for people to find you directly with our show notes. You can also just go to cairnspring.com, which is CAIRN spring.com. And while you're there, explore the stories of the farmers and bakers who are part of this growing movement. Frankly, I think my audience will have enjoyed the transparency and the frank emotion with which you attack today's conversation. I appreciate you. And I think many people, especially those foodies out there, are going to want to share this episode. Now, it's my belief that it's together that we're able to do things like regenerate Earth, one seed and one story at a time. When we care more, we can create a better planet for the people and for every grain and every seed that feeds us all, body and soul. Thank you.
Thank you, Corinna.
Thanks for listening to Care More, Be Better, a podcast for social good. To make sure you never miss an episode, subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts, and share with your friends to help us reach more people and spread more social good.